Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories that I've narrated and update them to the modern audio standards of today. If you like this sort of content, I'd be thankful if you click the like button, and if you're not and enjoy this content, subscribe. More importantly, we shall move on to the story, which I hope that you enjoy. Of Darkness and Monsters, written by RegalLegalEagle. I remember the last conversation I had with my handler. He assured me that while I was walking through the darkness right now, I would soon be able to come back out into the light. All I could say in return was that I wasn't walking through darkness. I had become it. I cut contact after that. There was no coming back by that point anyway. To get close to my target, I had to go well beyond the scope of reasonable criminal activity. There would be no pardon. My work would never see the light of day. I wouldn't have a burial. My name would never be known. All I'd become is a star on a wall. I'd come to accept that long ago. I had no concern for myself. I had lost that years ago, along with everything else in my life except for one very specific goal: to catch a monster. But the issue with catching monsters is that we always expect them to look different. Back on Earth, we seem to think you could spot one out of the crowd, to somehow magically know who was evil, like they'd spout horns and a tail, or let out some fiendish laughter and sharpen their claws. That the most disgusting-looking Xenos would turn out to eat babies and try conquer the galaxy. But that was never the case. Not really. I'd learned that early on. Monsters tended to look like normal people, be they human or Xeno. They had friends and family. They had dreams and birthdays. They laughed, told jokes, and acted like any normal person would. Most of the time. Being a monster was more about small moments, at least at first. Typically, the worst monsters had the best justifications. For the greater good was the most common, but it was deep-seated. No one wants to be the villain in their own story. We're always the hero, the protagonist. We do what we must, because we have to. That is how it works for most monsters, myself included. I think I came to that realization when I finally forgot how to cry. I knew I should have felt sad, that I should have cried my eyes out in private, like I had before after every kidding, that I should have mourned the lives I had taken from that family just so that I could inch ever closer to my goal. But when I sat in my bunk that night, I didn't cry. I just cleaned my weapon and went to sleep. There was no nightmares, no ghosts to haunt my conscience. No. It was the best sleep I had had in months. The next day, he welcomed me to his private crew. I had become the darkness. At that point, the only thing that separated me from him was the body count. I killed, murdered, assassinated. I'd threatened, kidnapped, tortured, and even bombed. There was nothing he had done that I hadn't. He had killed me just as surely as I planned to kill him. The body I inhabited was still living, but truly, I was dead. The person I'd been was no more, not for months now. No one I had once knew would recognize me. What I'd become, a monster somehow fitting into the skin of a person. I had to smile and laugh as he told jokes. I had to nod and agree as he spouted his nonsense about why he did what he did, why we did what we did. He tried to hide his evil behind what he claimed were good reasons. He made me lie to his face about how much I agreed with what we were doing, that I thought if everyone knew the truth, then they'd believe just like he did. I had to take his praise of my actions as if I were honored, to talk about what we did as if it were political, and not just the galaxy's largest criminal empire. And I took all of it and more. Because I was dead. Because I wanted one last thing, and I'd get it at any cost. I had no clue if the old contact had worked. I guess I'd find out soon. I stepped out onto the bridge. He was there with his entourage, humans and Xenos who believed in what they did. True monsters who laughed at his words like they were pure manna from the heaven. There would be no heaven for anyone here. I could already feel the fires of hell flickering at my feet. I was so close. So very close. He was flipping channels as usual. He always did that when he was looking for news reports about his latest works of art, as he called them. He stopped on Channel 4. The New Vexen anchor looked worried and surprised as breaking news was plastered across the bottom in the most urgent of font they had. Yes, it has been confirmed as we speak. The evidence in the hands of the Gulpole is being used even now to start dismantling the terrorist network. What? I could hear his surprise. He'd missed the first part of the broadcast. He leaned forward now, and the others could tell something was wrong. He changed the channel, but it was on every network. They were all talking about it. An anonymous source inside Gulpole was confirming that the worst criminal empire, or terrorist network, was being taken apart even now. But they wouldn't list how they acquired all this new intel. I smiled. I was right. No one would know I ever existed. Not really. The history books would just say that I had died 4 years ago with my husband and children. I didn't survive the blast. Maybe I hadn't. Maybe I really did die back then. We're getting unconfirmed reports, yes. The Rulian's 7 eyes narrowed as he read the information coming across his teleprompter, that he is in fact dead. Gulpole's ships are on their way now to dispose of position of his ship to confirm if he was within the wreckage. What? He jumped up, and then the others did too, all of them shouting and crying and screaming, in anger, confusion, shock, whatever emotion was strongest within them for that split second. But he was the only one who looked around, who turned back to see me. You! He gasped and pointed, finally seeing me standing here in my armored pressure suit. You! He repeated, as if he couldn't believe it. Perhaps he couldn't. Perhaps he believed me to be his loyal and dependable friend, and nothing more. Why? I figured he'd ask me that. Part of me wanted to say that it was for my family, for revenge. That a mother will never forgive the person who murdered her children, let alone her husband. Another part wanted to say that this was justice, for what we had done to all those people, both human and alien. Some smaller part wanted to say it was for myself, for what he'd made me do. But in the end, I said nothing. I just removed my thumb from the trigger I had pressed once I stepped onto the bridge. I would not give him a satisfaction of a last moment of life of knowing why. The explosives triggered, and I felt the jolt in the ship as if it were distant and far away, as if it were happening to someone else. Instead, I just focused on him, on his face. He let the air out of his lungs right away as the ship vented into the void. His grip on the couch strong enough to keep him from flying like so many of the others. He tried to reach out to me, but 10 seconds after the vent, he was out. His eyes rolled back into his head as he fell unconscious. I stood there feeling the rest of the ship start to rupture and break apart while remaining motionless, held in place by my grab boots. His body started to go stiff and then convulse and twisted before going stiff again. His body undergoing what was known as decompression sickness. The gases in his body trying to suddenly escape into the vacuum that now surrounded his body, likely snapping his bones in the process as his body twisted and convulsed. I wish that he could have been conscious for this, to feel his body start to expand as the water vapors filled his soft tissues, to make his body swell like a balloon before they could finally escape, with his blood and every other liquid now turned to gas. To experience what had to be agonizing pain as even the saliva on his tongue would boil. But he wouldn't. He had simply passed out and would never wake up. I just watched his body float there. I watched things start to escape his clothes as he lightly soiled himself while his blood lost all pressure and his physical being was ended after about a minute and a half. It was so short, and yet so long to stand there and watch. Everyone on board was dead now. I'd made sure that everyone not on the bridge was dead before I came up. And now, I just witnessed everyone on the bridge die. Except me. I had plenty of air left, and there likely was a Gulpole fleet heading towards the coordinates right now to verify what I'd told my old handler. I could very likely survive. But there was no point. The Xenos had no concept of undercover cop. There was nothing for me but trial and either execution or life in prison for the crimes I had committed to get here. No, I had known this going in, even if my handler didn't want to admit it. I thought about the gun at the hip, but dismissed it. I was too good of a death for a monster like me. Despite all the files I'd sent, I'd made sure to never include a picture. I hoped that they'd never discover which body on the streak was his, that they'd never be able to connect a face to a name. It was more than not wanting this to be linked back to a human. No, I didn't care about that. We knew what we were. It was simply so his face would fade into obscurity with his name, just like I would. The face of a monster who would easily have been confused for a kind-hearted schoolteacher. He had gentle eyes, average build, good teeth, but not perfect. He could have been almost anyone, but he wasn't. My hands moved up to the clasps on my helmet. I paused as I prepared to open them. I don't know why, though. I knew that I had to open the seal. I knew what I had to do. It was for the very reason I had forsaken rescue by Galpal. It was the same reason I had been sent after him. Something Galpal would never understand, what the greater galaxy would never understand. In a moment, I had popped the seal and become a star on a wall. For one reason. Humans clean up after themselves. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.